call the member for Solomon.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I too rise to speak on the Veterans Affairs Legislation Amendment Bill 2012. This legislation proposed by the government makes a series of minor technical amendments to Veterans Affairs portfolio legislation and to other acts that impact on veterans' entitlements. Most of the amendments, as my colleagues have said, are technical amendments which do not engage in any of the applicable rights of freedom. The amendments proposed are by no means controversial, and the Coalition supports the measures being introduced. While it's a good start, but the legislation can be made better, and that is what the Coalition is seeking to do by proposing these amendments. The Coalition seeks to legislate fair indexation as a requirement for the passing of this legislation. As the Shadow Minister, the member for Fadden, outlined, once passed through the House of Representatives, the Coalition will seek to make the Veterans Pharmaceutical Reimbursement Scheme the fair system it deserves to be. In March of this year, I pledged my commitment to veterans. I joined my leader, Tony Abbott, and Senator Michael Ronaldson to pledge our commitment to our veterans. And my pledge is here, and I would like to seek leave to table my signed pledge. Has
leave been granted? No, leave is not granted. The member for Solomon.
That's disappointing.
Does not have leave.
Very disappointing. I informed my electorate that as the elected representative, I would fight for a fairer system of indexation for the Defence Force Retirement Benefit, or the DFRB, and the Defence Force Retirement and Death Benefits, the DFRDB, military superannuation pensions. This is not a new platform. It's the same policy that the Coalition has been pursuing for some time. In fact, at the 2010 election, we committed to fair indexation. Despite the election outcome, the Coalition did introduce legislation into the Senate to provide fairness, justice and equity. Unfortunately, the Greens and the Labor Party opposed this legislation. The Coalition has remained committed to the introduction of fair indexation, and on September the 20th, 2011, the Leader of the Opposition, Tony Abbott, told the RSL National Congress in Melbourne, it has been to me and my colleagues, it has been long to me and my colleagues in the Coalition, verging on the scandalous that defence retirees do not enjoy the same index arrangements as other people who have retired. As I indicated earlier, in March this year, while in Bendigo, the Leader of the Opposition, together with the Shadow Minister for Veterans Affairs, Senator Michael Ronaldson, signed the Coalition's pledge to deliver fair indexation, which is the same pledge that I tried to table. The pledge says that a Coalition government will deliver fair indexation to 57,000 military superannuants and their family, and that the Coalition will ensure that DFRB and DFRDB military superannuation pensions are indexed in the same way as aged and service pensions. All DFRB and DFRDB superannuants aged 55 and over will benefit. It's only a Coalition government that will deliver fair, just and equitable indexation for DFRB and DFRDB pensions. I support the pledge, as I said, made, and through engagement with my local community, they know where I stand on this issue. This is a promise that I made, and it's locked in, just like the other Coalition members who have made similar pledges. In this current period of Australian politics, where those opposites are handing out cash left, right and centre, us on this side of the Parliament pause to remember those who represented this country, who fought for this nation and who lost loved ones away while fighting for Australia. Our veterans and their widows represent their fundamental bedrock to our Defence Force. Stop in any small town or a major city and you will always find an RSL supported by a proud membership. In my electorate, I have 3 RSLs, the Darwin RSL, the Darwin North RSL, Bowls Club and the Palmerston RSL. All are very, very popular amongst the local community. Veterans and those that remain must not be forgotten or stood aside by this government, because we will never forget, but we will be forever in their the debt that we owe them can never be paid with dollars and cents. We must do everything, Mr Deputy Speaker, that we can, and what is being proposed by these amendments is just a start. In my electorate of Solomon, we have almost 1,000 veterans, partners and dependents. And across Australia, as I said, there are about 57,000 recipients of military superannuation pensions. The Coalition's plan is to provide fair indexation to those people on the pensions, Mr Deputy Speaker. And as many of you would remember, Labor has led people to believe that they would provide a fairer deal for ex-servicemen and women. Unfortunately, in all their time in government, the Rudd-Gillard government has not delivered. In fact, when the Coalition's policy went to the Senate, it was the Labor-Greens alliance waltzing together which blocked the legislation. Absolute shame. I've been contacted by many veterans in my electorate seeking help because they are struggling to make ends meet. Bill Elliott of Malac recently came to one of my mobile offices to speak to me about the DFRB superannuation. He told me many veterans are feeling the pinch, particularly as they feel that they are turning their superannuation into a pension has disadvantaged them. Bill asked me several times, what have we done wrong? What is it and why? What is the government going to do? And this is unfair. Most men volunteered to serve their country. Another constituent from North Lakes in Darwin's northern suburbs, he's asked to be referred to as Mr J. He wrote expressing his concern. He said he receives a DFRB pension from the Navy, and he said he's disappointed that Labor is sticking to the CPI-related increase to his pension, which he believes is unfair. Last week I received an email from Rick who states, I received a $1.29 increase in my ComSuper pension. I retired last December after paying 5% of my wage for the past 32 years into ComSuper, thinking I would be able to survive. I won't be able to, and if that's the yearly CPI increase. I had to work for Defence for 38 years before pulling the pin. Natasha, please make a stand on my behalf. There are many more emails from people like Rick, Bill and Mr J who are pleading for help. Along with these veterans, as recently as last weekend, I was meeting with veterans in my electorate at the Vietnam Veterans Day memorial service, where after the service I discussed these matters with the people there that will be directly impacted by this. These issues were also raised and echoed by many at the two veterans forums which I've held recently in Darwin that were attended by the Shadow Minister for Veterans Affairs, the Shadow Minister Senator Michael Ronaldson, who got to hear firsthand from the veterans in my electorate and take up their concerns. And he was quite concerned, and they were really pleased that that Senator Ronaldson had actually taken the time, not once but twice, to come to Darwin to listen directly to their issues. Mr Deputy Speaker, it is no longer acceptable that the Labor government continue to fill about the edges of this policy while at the same time wholly dismissing the everyday concerns of veterans and ex-service personnel and their families. Local veterans who are DFRB and DFRDB military superannuants have proudly served their nation. It's time that the nation recognise the unique nature of military service and delivered fair pensions indexation to these men and women and their families. Not only are our veterans facing unfair indexation, but they are facing the double whammy of the carbon tax, with no direct compensation to assist and offset the increased costs associated with this toxic tax. This is why I'm speaking on this amendment. I'm voicing the concerns of those Territorians who want fair indexation, who deserve fair indexation. They've made sacrifices, and it's only fair that they receive fair indexation. Mr Deputy Speaker, not a week goes by that Territorians, in particular our veterans, don't raise with me the fact that they are struggling, and that the veterans say to me that they want fair indexation. Electricity bills are starting to arrive in letterboxes, and households are beginning to feel the pressure which being put on it with the extra costs that are directly related to the carbon tax. Yet, despite the clear cries of help from veterans struggling to make ends meet, Labor say the scheme is too expensive. A few months ago, Veterans Affairs Minister Warren Snowden argued that a superannuant on $58,000 per year didn't need fair indexation, that they were already well off. Well, he should know better. He lives in the Territory and he knows that $58,000 is not a lot of money when you live in a regional centre like the Northern Territory. What Minister Snowden failed to acknowledge, however, is that the average DFRDB military superannuation pension is just $24,386, 2.5 times less than the figure he quoted in June. Now, that same month, veterans were sent letters advising that they would receive a few cents extra per fortnight in their pensions. Many veterans received an increase of less than $1 per fortnight. This is just a disgrace. Then we have Penny Wong claiming that the Coalition's $100 million costing is actually $1.7 billion and that the scheme to fully implement will cost $4.5 billion. Well, factually, Mr Deputy Speaker, cost to the Commonwealth for fair indexation over the next 4 years is not $1.7 billion as claimed by Labor, but it's approximately $100 million. Mr Deputy Speaker, at the last election, as you know, the Coalition identified more than $50 billion in savings necessary to meet the costs of our commitment. Following the election, the Coalition identified more than $170 million in savings, which I can say were later adopted by the Gillard Labor government as a savings of their own. We identified savings once to fund this important change, Mr Deputy Speaker, and we will again find the funds necessary to make this important change for our defence people. If the Gillard Labor government could stop wasting money on poorly implemented initiatives such as pinkbacks, school halls and cash for clunkers, along with reducing the cost for advertising their toxic carbon tax, then maybe there'll be some money around to pay for fair indexation, which could be well and truly funded. Predictions for the cost of fair indexation in the first year is estimated to be $4 million. Yet in this year alone, Labor will spend $36 million on advertising their toxic carbon tax. It's clear that Labor has its priorities absolutely in the wrong order. Mr Deputy Speaker, in conclusion, the Coalition does not move this amendment lightly, nor do I support the proposals lightly. The bill before the House makes a number of important legislative changes which I support, and I urge those members such as the member for Dobell and the member for Eden Monaro who claim that they support veterans. Well, if that's true, then I urge them to get on board and come over and get their crossbencher mates to support this amendment moved by the Shadow Minister, the member for Fadden. I believe that the government should now introduce fair, just and equitable arrangements for military superannuants. It's time for fair indexation for our veterans. It's time that the Parliament delivered. I honour the veterans in my electorate and I want them to know that I will continue to fight for fair, better indexation for DFRB and DFRDB superants, just as my fellow Coalition colleagues. This is my pledge, Mr Deputy Speaker. Along with other Coalition members, we support defence personnel.